So hello everyone, thank you all for being here. It's a real pleasure to be able to tell you about this project that we call Vitvélastofnun Íslands, the Icelandic Institute for Intelligent Machines, whose idea started around the time when Ingvi Björnsson and I founded the Reykjavik University AI Lab in 2005, but didn't really take off, was still an idea on paper until 2009. And what happened at that time, in 2009, was that the Science and Technology Policy Council of Iceland had put out a call for proposals for bridging between academic and industry research, among other things. And this call couldn't have come at a better time, because at that time we had prepared ideas for this institute. And in fact, a little bit earlier, I had, by a chance coincidence, met with one of the founders of DFKI and found out that, no, this was not my unique idea that no one else had in the world, but rather that the Germans already did it and they proved that it worked. That was some time ago, but that was a great experience. It was like the most pleasant disappointment I've ever had, I think, in my professional career, because we had been working on this idea for so long and for years, and then Jörg Siegmann just, hands it to me. Yes, it's a good idea. We did it already. So we got this grant for a period of 7 years. It's now been roughly a little bit longer than that. We have a board of directors, we have a board of advisors, and we have researchers and staff, which varies depending on how you count and when you count. I think we've had as many as 13 people at one point. And the main mission is essentially to spur progress in high-tech innovation in Iceland via world-class research in the areas of AI, simulation, and related technologies, and bridge between academia and industry, and act as a catalyst to spur interaction between researchers and developers, produce new ideas, develop prototypes and explore ideas, and in general, transfer knowledge in a proactive way, rather than sit around and wait for it to hopefully trickle into industry. So some of the main top goals that we set ourselves at this time was to create a self-sustaining, internationally known research center in Reykjavik, to advance the fields of AI, simulation, and related technologies and their broad application, provide tangible returns to industry and to all participants and collaborators, facilitate collaboration, and generate and keep high technology industry in Iceland. So just to put it graphically, this is the general idea. We rely, of course, on publications, scientific traditional publications. We rely on the latest and greatest open source. We would like to spur and encourage startups and help startups to control intellectual property flow, make it more dynamic and more flexible, to basically bridge in all possible ways and efficient ways between these parties. So just a short list of the benefits, and this is basically the list as it appeared in the original documentations. The grant proposal that we wrote was one of 3 out of 200 that was picked for this grant. It was a competitive grant, so it was not a handout. This list and the next one pretty much is the same, and some of the main benefits for industrial and government sponsors of IIIM we foresaw was access to a growing portfolio of innovative solutions, exploration of solutions to upcoming problems, and even current existing problems, source of new ideas, scalable project participation. Now, you'll notice some of these, in fact, probably all of these are also beneficial in the interaction and collaboration between industry and academia directly. But I'll get to that in a second. Access to advanced know-how and increased resource availability for R&D, and this is maybe one of the main bullets that sets this apart, because the idea here is, in addition to academic research, which by and large should and is typically basic, that is, it's not steered by the needs of industry. In addition to that work, we would here focus specifically on the usage, the application, the benefits of these new ideas that are being developed in academia. There are also benefits to an affiliate university, and these are based, of course, on Saarland University and DFKI to some extent, because DFKI came out of Saarland University, and the motivation there was, as I understand it, that Saarland is a bit of an isolated state in Germany, and it was hard to keep people there, so sort of a little bit like Iceland. And they wanted more flexible structures so that they could offer researchers other things than simply academic positions, which were and still are, I think, hard to come by in German universities. So here the list is as follows: diversification of research project origins, like where's the motivation, where does it come from? Closer connection to industry, and this is already something that Icelandic universities are very interested in. Without the increased in-house overhead of building your own sort of big industry relationship department. Diversification of research funding, both for projects and for research salaries. More diverse options for offering classes, alternative funding model that to increase the resilience, the flexibility of the system when this kind of funding dries up, we can make use of that kind of funding and so on. Increased opportunity for funding student research and student training. So all of this is intended to bridge a gap. And you might ask, is there a gap? What is this gap? Why haven't I heard of it? Well, you might have, but my guess is that you haven't. So let's start with this timeline here. I don't know if you can you see it? Good. So let's say that this is the time horizon into the future. The beginning of it is now. And as you think about what the future may hold, the further into the future you go, the greater the uncertainty, but also potentially the opportunities. And this is where academia needs to sit to do publishable basic research. Academics need to think at least 10 years into the future about basic problems that are not immediately necessarily useful, but may solve some deep conundrum. 10, I think, is really a minimum. In my experience, this is more like 20. But it depends on how you measure it and what areas you're talking about. But in any case, in my experience, I don't really think I've seen ever good academic research that wasn't thinking further ahead, further, at least 10 years ahead, if not further. So anyway, on the other hand, you've got industry. Industry is thinking here and now. We have to grow. The purpose of a company is to grow and make money. And we want to pay, for this we have to be able to pay our staff salaries. And we may afford ourselves to think 3 years ahead, 4 years ahead. I think in Iceland I have only talked to one company that's thought 6 years, well, you could argue that they were thinking 6 years into the future. I think the typical number is 3. In fact, one company that we worked with said, if we catch any of our staff thinking further than 3 years into the future, they're fired. So this is where IIIM comes in. In academia, to illustrate this in a very simplistic way, you might have a bright idea or discovery. And instead of having that go out in a paper in a scientific journal and maybe by chance someone in industry grabbing a hold of that or finding it and deciding, hey, here's an idea, I'd like to try to use it for something, IIIM basically takes an active role in moving those ideas from simply being a blue sky to something useful. That may end up actually destroying the idea. There may be other things that are needed to actually make that transition. But we'll find out much sooner and for much more for sure than if that's just sitting out there. We end up with prototypes, early application demonstrations, and we also end up with derived technologies because oftentimes you need some sort of tools, new ideas, new tools in order to actually make these prototypes. And so you bring these benefits to industry. And as Alyosha mentioned, we have the same model. We provide our collaborators with free licensing. We do try to, in all our projects, to stay away from the core technology that distinguishes a company and makes it unique and makes it be able to compete, so that we don't end up in a situation where the ideas that are being developed in IIIM get locked up and of no use to anyone else. This is the worst case scenario really for this model. So we implement an acceleration process here. What about the other direction? Do we have an acceleration process? Yes. It's not maybe as obvious, and it's a bit a different kind, but it is there. So basically, when industry comes to us and says, we've got these problems or we've got this data, can you help us do this with it? Well, we often do analysis. We may have to do some research. In fact, we may have to take some software that's already open source or that we've developed in-house and modify it and see if those ideas make any sense whatsoever. This is oftentimes much more hands-on than you'd like to think. You'd like to think that an expert in some field can just sit there and think about it and then give you their opinion. But oftentimes it actually takes typically an individual researcher who's very knowledgeable and interested in this, maybe 3 calendar months to sit there and tinker a little bit and do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. They may implement some code, they may run some data, some algorithms on some data, and then somehow, the human mind is a wonderful thing. Somehow they get they see the light, they understand to the extent necessary whether something makes sense and what needs to happen, what the possibilities are. So this is the big picture so far. And if it wasn't for Reykjavik University, of course, none of this would happen. None of this would have happened. This is really our big anchor in this. And especially the AI lab and the staff in that, of which Ari was actually a member once. But we kicked him out when he stopped doing AI research. And funding from the Science and Technology Policy Board, managed by Rannis. And I really do want to mention that CCP really believed in us in the beginning. They hit some hard times, so things changed with the arrangement, but nevertheless, this was a really big boost in credibility for us. And last but not least, I cannot forget the support that DFKI has provided through the years in terms of advice. trust, I mean, they really believe this. And they have a reason to, because they know how to do it. Okay, so here's some burning questions. Now that these 7 years have passed, I imagine these are questions that a lot of people here, and in fact, I do think that a lot of people of my colleagues also have these questions. Can a DFK-like entity be implemented in Iceland? Can we use the same business model as DFKI? And if not, would that be a problem? Why should we trust that? Will Icelandic industry players be interested? Does academia play ball? Do we have the right talent? I mean, we're in the middle of the ocean. Will the necessary talent, if that turns out to be not true, be willing to move here from overseas? Will the government help? Do we need more funding? Can IIIM grow to self-sustainability? And now we are getting to the results that I promised. So with these questions as a start, we can check this off. We already have the proof. The reports have been delivered. And this talk is among one of the first big mediations of these results to you, to society, in fact, directly. Can we use the same business model as DFKI? Well, yes, absolutely. In fact, I was so shocked after we had been running for, I think, 5 years. I visited DFKI in Berlin, and we went through in very great detail over the course of a whole day all of the main points about how DFKI is run and how IIIM had solved things to that point in time. And I walked out of that meeting so amazed how similar the solutions were. It was really amazing. And in fact, you could say that it was essentially identical. Now, of course, the environment in Iceland is different. So don't forget, we're not saying, we'll have DFKI in 800 researchers in Reykjavik in 30 years, or in 5 cities in Iceland, because we're talking about the entity itself, the main idea and its implementation, but the environment is different, the time is different, etc. There are lots of issues that make this not obvious, nonetheless. Icelandic industry players, well, yes, really interested, especially in the last 18 months. Now, we have yet to see more companies follow through on that interest. But yes, this is really a different time. Academia, you bet. If it wasn't for my colleagues and for this university here, none of this would have happened. Do we have the right talent? Well, to some extent. Maybe I shouldn't have put a green mark on there, but when not, yeah, then yes, the good talent from overseas will come. In fact, we have one of the best researchers that I've ever worked with who moved to the US 2 years ago. Now he wants to come back. Maybe it's because of some president that he doesn't like. I don't know. I'm guessing. I would be looking for an island in the middle of the ocean if, Anyway, that's a different talk. Will the government help? Well, the government has helped, but as we saw in the numbers from Alyosha, we are in the middle of a startup. And to expect, and in fact, DFKI has helped many countries start something like this, or at least 2 that I know of, Finland and Australia. And no one has ever been able to do this in a shorter time span than 14 years. So that's like a typical startup. Do we need funding? You bet. We need more funding. In fact, my back-of-the-envelope calculations show that we got about 4 times as little funding as DFKI until they become self-sustainable, and about half the time. So yeah, there's some, but now this experiment has been done, and I'll show you some more reasons for why I think this experiment should continue. Do we need more funding? Yes, double check. Can we grow to self-sustainability? I'm absolutely sure we can, but the question is, will we? So that's the big question mark here, and that's what I would really like to see happen. Some more results in a different format. Let me tell you a little bit about the companies we've worked with so far. These are in a mixture of small startups like RUG and bigger behemoths like Usher and Marel. And all of these have been very fruitful and fun and interesting projects with tangible results. This is just a small collection, the ones that had a nice logo. Did we have the sufficient staff in-house or know-how in our extended family to finish some of these projects? No. Were all of these parties happy with what we did? Yes. And in fact, the three last ones are actually fairly recent, so I shouldn't jump the gun on that. We'll see. But I'm very confident. So just really quickly, because I think this is maybe the most novel aspect of what we propose, and the most strange and foreign idea, to some people at least. We have this thing called viskubrunnurinn, or a melting pot, fountain of knowledge, if you will, although it doesn't, it's not the right imagery, but anyway. And the principle, and I think I'm speaking for DFK as well and other institutes that are modeled in a similar way. But due to the sort of immaturity of the Icelandic innovation landscape, this may be more foreign for us here than say in Germany. But anyway, let me just explain very quickly how the economies of scale come into play in this model. So you have IIIM working with lots of parties in very different sectors on very different projects. However, the technology is about automation. It's about computers. It's about data. And what we do for the National Commissioner of the Police, on the one hand, could benefit a small company like RUG or Thórisson that's just starting out with a very different proposition. But there is really no place, there's no system in place for making that knowledge transfer happen. So what we do is we convince every one of our collaborators to agree to share. There are some conditions on that, and I'm not going to go into detail, but so far I have met several companies that really understand this and get it immediately and like it. I've met others, I will name no names, but they're also actually in this picture, some of them, that really don't get it and are really paranoid in the old-fashioned sense. Like, I paid for this, I own it. And that's fine if they want to go that route. But it's not fine if it destroys our potential for implementing this mechanism, because I think it's brilliant. Now I can say it's brilliant because I didn't invent it, actually. And we work with these companies, and then they give us our ideas and requirements and needs. And we work on ideas and solutions for them that can then go back to them and others. All right? So something that comes from the commissioner of the National Commissioner of the Police can actually benefit RUG. Why should the National Commissioner for the Police care to lock those ideas up in a vault and let no one else see it? Why? I asked myself that. I don't think there's any good solid reason. There's no economical reason. As long as privacy rules are upheld, there's no issue whatsoever. So, in fact, when RUG works with us they have a potential to benefit from the ideas of all the other partners. And this is a kind of technology and know-how transfer that I have never seen anywhere else, and that really is a really fantastic way to do in a strategic way. I mean, yes, of course this happens all the time, but it's completely random. All right, so let me give you some, I see the clock's ticking, some example project areas. Well, there's a long list of project areas. We work on anything from various kinds of machine learning to real-time control, dialogue. There's been a lot of projects. With USR, we actually help them improve. And USR came to us with a very specific problem. We want you to help us improve a product that's already on the market. And it was a very successful and nice collaboration. We actually did more than one project with them. And we provided them with a solution that was delivered on target. With RUG, they came to us with this thought: can we make a mobile GPS tower that can be put under a helicopter and flown to search for people who got lost in the highlands in Iceland and have their mobile phone on, so that the helicopter flies around with this antenna and triangulates where the person is. This flies on every search and rescue mission of the big red Landhelgisgæslu helicopter that sometimes sits out here. And so it's a deployed product that actually works. And it's the only product of its kind in the world. So there's innovation here that is world class. And I don't take credit for that. I mean, was really RUG's project. And then we worked with the National Commissioner for the Police on some parts of their mobile computing effort. And lastly, this project with a spin-off from Reykjavik University called 3Z, and we helped them develop computer vision mechanisms that could detect epileptic seizure behaviors in zebrafish. Yeah. So I said diverse. Yes, it's really diverse. Now, did we use the zebrafish technology in the helicopter? No. You can't see that beforehand, but that's exactly the point. You have a stable point of knowledge transfer, and you have that possibility. We also have a spin-off, and this was in 2013, actually. So we essentially have the full list of achievements, I think, to really convince even the most biggest doubters. Here are some things, and this company is going strong. Here are some things that were said about their first product, which came out actually within a year of their formation. And these are not nobodies. You can actually recognize these names. And Ghostline is their latest product, and people are really, really impressed. So a bit more by the numbers, and then I'm done. Over 50 scientific peer-reviewed publications, here are just a few of them. 60 media articles and interviews, so we really take that communication with the general public seriously, and we try to meet the demands and interests of journalists as much as we can. We have written over 30 national and international grant proposals, and yeah, these are some of them 80 pages. So this is not nothing. This is not just paperwork. We have collaborated with others in lots of events, sort of like this one that you're in. And this includes Reykjavik University Career Days, Rani's EU Researchers Night, AI Festival, and many more. Okay, so let's see if I remember what's on my slides. Okay, yeah. We have innovated and gone one step better than DFKI in one aspect, and that is, they told me recently that their rules of conduct for picking projects have always included the rule that they will not participate in developing technology that's aimed at killing or maiming people. And I thought that was beautiful to hear, but we beat them to it because we actually have an already published policy on peaceful R&D. And as far as I can tell, it's the only AI lab in the world that has this published policy. Now, DeepMind, Google's DeepMind has supposedly a committee, but it's rather obscure, or certainly was at the time we did this. We have signed a couple of letters on this. We really don't want this technology to be used against citizens. We want it to be used for citizens. And so you can see here, these are very interesting numbers. This was highly publicized, and this one as well, partly because both of these lists had Elon Musk on it, and whatever he touches, the media will write about. So, let's see. Did we achieve these benefits? This is different from the burning questions, but related. Yes. 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 And yes. Now, some of these are to a greater or larger extent, but it's pretty obvious when you look at the actual achievements. Benefits to affiliate university, well, I have yet to sit down with Ari and really go through this list, and maybe he'll turn my attention to some areas of shortcomings that I'm sure exist. But at least as far as the general idea and the sort of the general outline of the implementation, I really think that we have enough data now to answer these questions with a yes. And again, some of these are more meager than others, as in evidence, but still, the general idea here is to manage in a focused way the circle of people, projects, and intellectual property. I sometimes say we produce the 5 Ps, people, prototypes, intellectual property, let's see, okay, well, it'll come back to me. I thought I had a slide in here, maybe it'll come in a minute. So it's really the yin and yang here. We're really talking about the complete picture, academic AI research and industrial outreach, completing the system. And that was proven very nicely when recently a team of CADIA and IIIM employees won the Arion Bank hackathon on cryptocurrency, with a cryptocurrency app. So, finally, what lies ahead? Well, with results this positive, we can't really let this end. And that's my conclusion. To get a stable funding scheme, to keep good researchers between projects, to supply them with sufficiently advanced equipment, and to fund necessary extracurricular activities. Other funding can come from projects, from competitive grants, and from direct funding from industry for targeted research and development. And so that part is really just solved, but it's what Alyosha mentioned earlier, this bridging and this constant loss of talent that we need to stabilize. So the good is a lot more interest in AI now than ever, better understanding of the benefits of automation, and it's not that expensive compared to ignorance. The bad, it's sometimes difficult to convince people to do something new, and that's why I showed you the Viskubrunnur. And business practices aren't really don't really take this into account, this kind of a model. So in some sense, business practices need to adapt. And the ugly, of course, is that Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking keep scaring us that AI will take over. So in summary, I think there are enormous opportunities here. DFKI has shown the way, and they're really willing to help. There's a huge upside for a small community. The brain drain, for instance. We already have the proof in hand. So now is the follow-up. Now we need to continue with this and do even better. Thank you for your attention.
So I think we might have room for one question, and one question only, and then we'll have a panel afterwards. The second question. One question.
Yes. The workers' own taxation question is the one I'm going to ask you. We have about 100,000 labor force in this country, I believe. But let's say that this industry, artificial intelligence industry, adds 500,000 worker-own labor to the economy. I would think that the taxman should have a right to tax this labor force at least at a rate of 1/3 equivalent labor, human labor.
So this is the question of, I believe it was Bill Gates who kind of popularized this idea that what if a robot takes your job? Well, then the robot should pay taxes. But that's not really how it works, because the fact that the robot is now doing something that requires maybe 1% of the effort means that we can turn our attention to other more pressing and dire problems like global warming, planting trees, whatever it is, however we address it. And this time around, it's not that different from earlier times when automation displaced the workforce. It may happen a bit faster this time, but it's not really in any way different. And what really needs to happen is that the educational system needs to be even more adaptive and stronger than ever on all levels, but especially at the university level, so that this does not become a major crisis.
So let's thank Chris again for this talk here. So now this concludes the first session of today.